everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I hope that all of you are doing great. So today I am doing my best and worst books of 2023. Now listen, this is just my opinion, okay? This is just my humble opinion, and there might even be like contradictions, you know? As in, I hated this thing in this book, but I love this book that might have the same themes, things like that, but that's just how it is, okay? That's just how it's gonna be. Sometimes the things that I don't like way heavier than the things sometimes the things I don't like just way heavier, and then there are times when the good weighs more, you know what I mean? Anyway, so yeah, I wanted to make like a video only dedicated to like my favorite books, but I only rated 4 books 5 stars this year, and one of them was a reread, and then I have 8 books that I hated, and I feel like maybe I should have given that video its own video, but like I really want to share my favorites, and it's only 4 books, so it would be a really short video, so I'm just gonna connect them, okay? So I will have timestamps down below as well, but I'm going to start with the worst books I read. So the way I'm gonna do this is I'm gonna start with, so I have 8 books, right? I'm gonna do like my top 8. So the one that I'm gonna mention first is my least, the best one out of the least favorite list. That makes no sense. Basically, I'm gonna say the worst, the least, whatever. Okay. So I'm gonna start with the best one out of the worst ones. Okay. So we have Scarlet Princess. I feel like I need to do something with my hands because I only have one book to show physically. Scarlet Princess. So I listened to this book on Audible, on audio. So this follows, oh shoot, I was supposed to Google the names before I started this video. And I don't remember what her name was. It's fine. So it follows our main character. I'm just gonna call her Merida because she looks exactly like Merida from Brave, and you might as well just watch the movie instead of reading the book. So it takes place in Scotland, okay? It's called The Lachlan Feuds. It's a series. I think there's 4 books. And our girl Merida gets caught by she's like at another clan, I think, and she gets caught stealing vodka, and so she ends up being thrown in jail, and throughout the book they're just trying to figure out what to do with her. She's like essentially on trial, but she is a princess, right? So, you know, they have to be a little smart about their choices. And this book, here's the thing, it wasn't awful. The writing was pretty decent. I liked the main character, but it was just so boring, and it was very much character driven, which sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. There's a bug on my lamp that scared me for a second. Yeah, there's not really much plot happening, honestly. This book is very much no plot, just vibes. You know, a lot of people call it like a cozy read, which I guess it is, but to me it wasn't. So I just wasn't into it, and I am relatively far along in the sequel, and it's literally the same problem. It just, nothing's really happening. So I don't know if I'm gonna DNF it or not. It's also fantasy, but there aren't any fantasy elements. Really, there's one fantasy, like, yeah, there's like one fantasy element, but like it doesn't really, it just gets mentioned. So that was Scarlet Princess. I have a little little notepad here. So let me just okay, so next we have A Crown of Cursed Love. So this is by a woman named Jade Robinson, I think her last name is. And I actually follow her on TikTok, on Book Talk, and I actually knew about her before her book was released. So it was very cool to see her talk about the book and stuff, and that she's gotten this far. It follows our main character, Lana, who lives with her younger sister and her mom. And her mom and Lana have kind of a complex relationship, kind of like an abusive relationship. And then she has a best friend who is also kind of complex. There's like tension between them. He is one of the love interests. And then we have another guy named Aid, who's also a love interest. So she has 2 love interests, okay? So first of all, it's supposed to be fantasy, but there weren't really any fantasy elements. She would have kind of regular-ish nightmares, and the nightmares were definitely supernatural, but other than that, there wasn't really much happening in the fantasy area. At the end of the book, though, it is very much fantasy, and so I feel like the next book will probably focus a lot more on that, but it's still a little disappointing that there's no fantasy really other than the nightmares that she has. Second of all, there was no chemistry whatsoever between the love interests. Not any of them. The dialogue between them was, I don't know, it was just really dull. It was just very boring dialogue, and I said this in my other, my last book video as well. But every time she would interact with her best friend, it would always start off with him asking her if she's okay, if she's alright. Like, he would always, which, that's a sweet thing, right? But I felt like that was the only thing their conversations consisted of, was him just asking her if she's okay. That was all that happened. There was no depth to any of the conversations. And there's one spicy scene, and it was just a little bizarre where it took place. It took place at a restaurant, and it was just, I don't know, I felt like it was a weird setting to have the spicy scene. And yeah, there also wasn't really much plot. It was also kind of character driven, I guess. It honestly was giving more contemporary than anything. And yeah, so it wasn't great. Am I gonna read the sequel? Probably, because if it's gonna be on Kindle Unlimited, I probably will, just so I can be a hater if I don't like it. Next, we have 2 books from the same series. So we have Twisted Games and Twisted Love. So this is a series, and it follows 4 characters, and they're all friends. So it's a group of friends, a group of girlfriends, and each book follows their love stories. And the reason why I wanted to read this in the first place was because it had the bodyguard trope. And before I even got into reading, I always loved the idea of a bodyguard trope. I didn't know what a trope was at the time. So when I was like, bodyguard trope, I've always been into that. So let me read something about it. So that is Twisted Games. That's the second book. And so the second book follows a character named Bridget and her love interest Reese. And Reese is her bodyguard, and she's a princess of this made-up country. Okay, so I have to talk about both of them at the same time to explain why I didn't like it. So the first book, Twisted Love. Twisted Love. It was worse than Twisted Games. I still didn't love Twisted Games, but it was definitely worse than Twisted Games. So here's one pet peeve I have in books that I really do not like. I don't like it when characters who are supposed to be bad or morally gray just sounds really pathetic in my humble opinion. It makes a lot more sense to actually show it, like why they're bad, and obviously if they're like self-aware and know they're bad, that's, you know, yeah, I can handle that. It just depends on how it's written. And these two books were definitely written where the love interest, like especially the first book, like when I talked about this book, I like underlined so many stuff from the book of just things that I found so cringy, and I actually read it out loud in that video. So if you're interested, I'll have a link down below, and then there will be a timestamp. But so that's the first thing I didn't like, is how he consistently said how bad he is and like whatever. Again, very edgy. Second thing is how he, along with her brother, they infantilized her so much that it was just cringy. She's a grown woman. Okay, did I even say what their names were? Ava and Alex are their names. So Ava is a grown woman, she's like 22, and he like treated her as if she was like this naive, innocent little thing, and he was not giving, okay? On top of that, Ava is a model, okay? So there's a scene where she's modeling, and Alex can't get a hold of her because she's at work, okay? And eventually he ends up finding her and sees that she's doing like a boudoir lingerie scene with another guy, which was most likely platonic because she's at work. And this man threatens the photographer to delete the pictures. Hours of work that she did, that was the beginning where I was like, this man is just not. And so yeah, it had not great writing. The love interest, both of them were not great. It was just very itchy. I didn't like that. It was cringy. The dialogue between them was just horrendous. So yeah, but I was still eating them up. This is the thing where I'm like torn, because a lot of these books I was eating up. Like, I was enjoying the book while I was reading it, but did I actually enjoy the content? No. It wasn't good, you know? So, yeah. So next we have The Ritual. Again, I was eating it up. I finished it only in a couple of days. It was also like 600 pages. But again, the content was not great. So, The Ritual is about this like secret elite society where it's like a generational thing where you can become a lord, and the actual like letters in lord stands for something. It's like the L stands for law, the O stands for obey, the R stands for reward. I don't know. Okay, here's the thing. I haven't read all the books, and I probably won't, but it doesn't really explain what it is too much. Like, it explains like it's a secret society, and that you, in order to become a lord, like, you have to, like, I guess you're kind of like an assassin in a way, but in order to become a lord, you have to go through a 3-year a 3-year initiation, where you also have to be celibate for 3 years. And like it kind of explains that, but like it doesn't really explain the origin. Like, it doesn't like the society doesn't really make sense. And they even talk about it in the book, where they're like, it's basically built on the patriarchy. It's men being in power, and after 3 years, when they become a lord, some of them don't. If you do become a lord, you can choose a lady. But they have to choose you back. Okay, so that's essentially what it's about. So it is very, very spicy. Okay, the girl, like, she was just so, like, this man would lie to her left and right, and for some reason she would also like blame herself when he would like do something awful. She would like blame herself, which she was a doormat is what she was. Okay, like everyone around her was just manipulating her, and it was just awful. This book was also way too goddamn long. This book had no business being 600 damn pages, which brings us to the next book, which I DNF'd. Now listen, I really have only two reasons to DNF. I will DNF if the content was genuinely awful, or if I just wasn't feeling it or enjoying it. Sometimes I will go back to the book, but in this case I DNF'd it because I was just like, no. So I decided to read The Sinner, which is the sequel to The Ritual. It starts just the same, like it starts with showing like the 3-year initiation. So I decided to DNF it because once again, I was influenced by mostly the review where people said it was basically this exact same as The Ritual, and so I was like, no. And because then I knew I wouldn't like it. But also it was also 600 pages. I think it might have even been longer than The Ritual, and I got introduced to the female main character, and I just was not liking her, so I DNF'd it. Now we get to my 1-star read. So next we have is The Never King, another book I read on Kindle. So The Never King is a Peter Pan retelling, and it follows our main character. You know what, honestly, this book started off good. Honestly, like I had high hopes just from the beginning, but then when she actually arrived on Neverland, it went downhill real quick. So yeah, it essentially follows our main character, Winnie, and her mom actually went to Neverland, and then her mom, basically ever since her mom came back, she hasn't been the same since. And like her mom would constantly talk about Neverland, talk about, you know, like the boys on the island, and Winnie always just thought that her mom was crazy, whatever. But then one day Peter Pan actually shows up. I think the day she turns 18, I think, which is also just creepy, but whatever. He shows up and she's like, damn, he's real, and he takes her back to Neverland. And I had high hopes for this, y'all. I really did. This book was really short, so I finished it only in I think I finished it in a day. This was very much no plot, just spice, and if that's what you like, that's totally fine, but I didn't like it. So Winnie, this is just personal preference, right? I don't care if the main character sleeps around, I do not care, but if it's a thing where she sleeps with like the entire friend group and they all get into a relationship, I don't like that. She essentially sleeps with all of them, and they hate her at first, and she also hates them. And this book is really short. It was like 112 pages, and somehow, for no reason, they immediately get attached to each other. I mean, I would understand her in her case because she's like kidnapped, but with them, I just found it kind of weird because, again, there was no depth. There were no reasons for them to just suddenly just care about her. It just made no sense. So this book was genuinely so bad because I was like, what is this? Yeah, and I'm still tempted to read the sequel because I'm a hater and I was still enjoying it to an extent, but the actual content was just not great. Winnie was also just an insanely dull character, and all of the guys kind of have the same exact personality as well. So yeah. Alright, so now we have the last book of my least favorite. So this is the worst book. Okay, this is the worst book. It's like kind of on the same level as The Never King, but I DNF'd it, okay? So I read God of Malice. Now listen, I this is kind of where the contradiction comes in here. So, I loved Haunting Adeline. Okay, not the first book, but the sequel. Absolutely adored that book. And I actually do want to reread it to see if I feel the same way, but I literally ate it up. I was obsessed. The first book, I didn't like. I rated the first book 3 stars, right? And it's kind of giving this. It's kind of giving the same vibe here. Like I find that a lot of dark romance men are quite similar, but I found personally that Sade, I still found him to be like intimidating. At least, he was definitely cringy. Don't get me wrong, but I still found him to be like relatively scary and like I don't know. There was just but in this one it was just bizarre. Like this book just starts in a wild way that I just did not like. Same thing with Haunting Adeline. There's one scene in the first book that I don't love, but yeah, this book also just starts absolutely crazy. So trigger warning, essay. And then he just starts stalking her. Once again, absolutely no personality. His entire personality is a stalker and like, I guess, like sex. And her thing is also just nothing. Like these girls that I've read just like do not fight back in the slightest. I don't know, it was just, the writing was also just horrendous, and I just was not. And once again, she started caring for him basically only within a couple of pages, which like slightly caring about him, which also just made no sense. And so far, a lot of the dark romance I read were just like, they're just not good. Okay, they're just not good. So there we have the worst books that I read of 2023. Now, we're gonna get into the good ones. We're gonna talk about my favorite books that I rated. Once again, so we only have 4, so I will be doing a top 4. So the first book I'm gonna mention is my least favorite of my favorites. Obviously, it was not my least favorite because I still rated it 5 star. But I'm gonna save the best one for last, okay? So the first book is A Dowry of Blood. So this book is very short. I don't remember how many pages, 200 pages maybe 100 something. I don't remember. And my friend actually also read it, and she also loved it and gave it 5 stars. This book was really good. So it is a Dracula retelling, and it's from the perspective of one of his lovers. Her name is Constanta, and this book takes place in like for many years. Like by the end, she's like 500, maybe even more. She might even be like 1,000 years old at this point. So it's like very fast paced, but what I liked about it was, first of all, the writing was just beautiful. I adored the writing. But what I liked about it was it shows more like subtle ways of abuse, essentially. Like, it's not so in your face. There was one time where it was, but it's more like subtle of how Dracula treats Constanta, that I just felt was very realistic. And also, I know I literally just said that I don't like poly relationships, but this one is the only exception because the relationship between these characters was just so wholesome. Okay, this is gonna sound really stupid, but I feel like there's a difference between like smut and like erotica or like sex and lovemaking. I feel like there's a difference, and this book very much was just like the way that the author wrote the spice scene was just so beautiful. Okay, and I could really feel the attachment that the characters had towards each other, and this book was just so good. I don't want to hear any criticism on it. I don't care. it was great. I absolutely adored this book, and I highly recommend. It's also very short, so I recommend it. Next, we have A Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy. I actually have, so this is a trilogy, and I actually have two of the books. I have the first book and the last book because I really want to reread the first book, and I haven't read the third book yet, and I really should have brought this one as well because I have the other two, but I didn't because I didn't have enough space in my suitcase. Okay, so this trilogy, I think, first of all, is criminally underrated because it is so good. So the first book is called The Gentleman's Guide to Vice Virtue, which was also one of my favorite books of 2022, right? Yeah, I absolutely adored it. And then a year later I decided to read the sequel because I wasn't interested at first because I'm a sucker for romance, and I knew that the sequel, it didn't have romance because each book follows a different sexuality, if you will. So in the first book, the main character has he's bisexual. In this one, she is aromantic asexual, which means she doesn't feel romantic or sexual attraction. And I think that the third book, which I haven't read yet, I'm pretty sure he's gay. So he follows three siblings. So it's called the Montague siblings, and it takes place in the 1800s, which is also why I love it. And I just, this chef's kiss. Okay, I highly recommend it. The first book is romance though. So so this follows the sister, okay, of the trio, Felicity. I remember her name. So Felicity wants to become not a doctor, but she wants to do something within medicine, right? But because it's the 1800s and she's a woman, it's a little bit more difficult. So she is basically working her way to make this happen. And there's like one guy in particular that she adores, this doctor, I guess, that she just like really, really loves, and she really wants to speak with him and hopefully become his intern. And so you just see, you know, obviously her determination to make this happen, but also the struggles that she faces as a woman. And there's one scene in particular in this book that is honestly my Roman Empire. Like, I think about this scene daily because it really just touched something deep inside of my dark heart, okay? And I actually read that scene out loud, some of it, when I talked about the book in another video, which, again, if you're interested, I will link that down below. And once again, if you go to the description of that video, you'll see the timestamp. But it was just such a powerful scene, very much like female anger, female wrath, female rage. On top of that, it also focuses on friendship. And what I also really admire about these books is that the characters like recognize their flaws. Like Felicity deals with a little bit of internalized misogyny, which I think is really cool that the author added that in, because a lot of women, me included, sometimes struggle with internalized misogyny. And so the fact that she added it in was just fabulous, and the way that she dealt with it was great, and the way that she was being held responsible by the other characters was also just great. And so this book was just so good. I didn't love it as much as, or did I? I don't know. I rated both of them 5 stars, but this book was just so good. Just so freaking good. And I highly recommend. I don't know how the third book is yet, but I highly recommend the first and second book. So the next book I'm gonna talk about is this one. This is the only one I have physically. So this is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries. This is a Fairy Loot special edition. I got it in the subscription box. mom's house. And Fairy Loot are actually also doing the they're also coming out with a special edition of the sequel, and I really freaking want it. So I put it on my calendar and everything because I want it. Anyway, so this book, the reason I loved it so much is it reminds me a lot of The Cruel Prince, which I know is a big claim to make, but it very much did, just not as violent. So this follows our main character Emily, who travels around Europe looking for or researching different kinds of fae, and so she ends up at this secluded little village because she wants to find a specific rare kind of fae. And it was just very, very cozy. It's a very, very cozy book, and because it's like during the winter. I loved Emily as a main character, and the love interest, I would say he's a love interest. There isn't really any romance in here. There isn't romance, but there is like an attraction. This book was just very funny as well. It was just the dialogue between, like, there was so much chemistry between the characters, and it was just hilarious. And some of the things that Emily does is just so unhinged, and this book was just fantastic. I literally ate it up. It was so good. It also depicts, just like The Cruel Prince, it depicts the fae as being kind of not evil, but like morally gray. So yeah, just so good, and I need to reread it before I read the sequel. So now we're at the last book, because this one is my favorite. Again, like, it was actually very hard to rank these because, again, they're all 5 stars and I loved all of them. But the last book has to go through my love. The book that really got me into this series, that I ate up when I really started feeling an attachment to the series. We have Heir of Fire, which is from the Throne of Glass series. So, as you may or may not know, Throne of Glass is one of my all-time favorite series. I love that series. And up until Heir of Fire, I just wasn't really caring about it. And when I got to Heir of Fire, I was obsessed. And I reread it last year, and it was just as good. It was even better. I remember, like, when I was reading, there's a character named Manon, and she gets introduced in Heir of Fire. And I remember when I was first reading Heir of Fire, I found her chapters to be so boring. But when I reread it, I just had so much more appreciation for her, and I enjoyed her chapters actually quite a lot. But this is just the book when Aelin really starts to grow as a person, and I just love this book. Once again, it's my Roman Empire. I love it. Which, if you don't know what Throne of Glass is about, it is a YA, but it kind of steers more towards adult later on. And it follows our main character Selena, who is she ends up winning this competition and becomes the evil king's champion, and she has to do his dirty work. And there's a lot of, like, just secrets around the castle, and secrets that she has and the people around her, and it's just like this whole thing. And it is obviously fantasy, and so many goddamn characters, and yeah, I don't know, can't really say too much, but it is one of my favorite series. I don't care what anyone says. I know it gets a lot of hate, but I love it. And the Throne of Glass over ACOTAR any damn day. So yeah, that is my favorite books of 2023. I'm very excited what this year is gonna bring. Some more awful books, maybe a new favorite. I really hope I'm gonna have some 5-star reads this year. I'm currently reading The Hunger Games, and let me tell you, I'm eating it up. I am eating it up way more than I thought I was gonna eat it up. So yeah, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one.